Well, the FBI says it is investigating the deadly truck attack in New Orleans as an act of terrorism. David Viola joins us now. He's an adjunct professor at the John Jay College Center on Terrorism here in New York and an intelligence officer in the U.S. Navy Reserve. Thank you so much, David, for being with us. I want to ask you, some of the idea behind the terrorist label is about semantics, but can you tell us why law enforcement is so sure that they are investigating this as a terror attack? We know that he had an ISIS flag on his truck, that he had proclaimed loyalty to ISIS. Can you help us distinguish between simply something that is meant to elicit the most fear and terror from people as possible and what we know about the suspect?
Well, thanks for having me. And to be honest, the attack in New Orleans is kind of a layup for authorities to label this one as terrorism. First, as you mentioned, the allegiance that the suspect had professed a number of times in recent days to ISIS, and the flag found on the truck also pointing towards his allegiance to ISIS is pretty indicative of somebody who is engaging in radical Islamic politics, and ISIS is already a designated foreign terrorist organization. So anyone conducting violence in support of ISIS is going to be what we would label as a terrorist. And just Bourbon Street on New Year's Eve, terrorists more often than not, if not all of the time, go toward the symbolic locations in our society on symbolic dates as well. And in New Orleans, other than Mardi Gras, New Year's Eve is probably as symbolic a time and place as it gets. So this was a pretty easy one, unfortunately, to say that this is terrorism.
And big gatherings are typically targets for people seeking to do this kind of damage and inflict harm. And we know that the Department of Homeland Security had warned municipalities after that vehicle attack in Magdeburg, Germany on December 20th. We also know that those barriers, bollards along Bourbon Street, were in the process of being replaced. They were actually in the down position. And that police thought that they were, trying to make amends around that. They had set up a police vehicle as a barricade to block access, but still that attacker from surveillance video drove around that vehicle, drove onto the sidewalk, plowed through the crowd still. So as city and state officials analyze what happened, do you think they'll find that enough was done?
I think that the authorities will look back at their plans and say that they had all the right plans in place. They had bollards that you had mentioned that, even if they weren't in the correct position, were there. They had police vehicles there. They very clearly had a certain amount of law enforcement officers there who engaged with the suspect almost immediately once he got out of the vehicle. So they had all the right plans in place. It just comes down to the cliche that we always talk about, is that we as authorities need to get all of these things right 100% of the time, and terrorists need to get it right just once.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of what happened here, is that if this police vehicle that this suspect went around was 1 or 2 feet in the forward position, then the guy probably doesn't get his truck around that car. And it just comes down to the unfortunate reality that we need to execute 100% of our plans 100% to get to really prevent terrorism from happening. And it's close to impossible, if not impossible, for that to really be a reality.
Despite falsely claiming that the suspect was an immigrant, the president-elect did that. We know he was a 42-year-old U.S. citizen, Army veteran from Texas. He'd been divorced 3 times, was said that he had been struggling with financial issues. He posted social media videos about ISIS and his intent. Does this fit the profile for someone who could be radicalized?
I think it's really hard to say that there is a profile of an American who is going to be radicalized. And as you correctly point out, this is an American born in Texas who joined the military. A lot of people who espouse the cliches about who's going to become a terrorist, they wouldn't use that profile. But that's also kind of a similar profile of what Timothy McVeigh was, right? An American born in the United States who joined the military and moved toward terrorism in the years after. So I would hesitate to say that there is a profile of someone who is going to radicalize to violence and violent politics. We've seen those individuals come from a background that is native to the United States or immigrant to the United States, from the radical left side of the politics or radical right politics. religious in nature or completely non-religious in nature. So unfortunately, it's hard to say that there is a profile of someone who's going to engage in terrorism until after it happens, and then we can piece it back and look how that radicalization actually happened. That this was somebody who was probably searching for structure and meaning in life after the military and had gone through some tough times. Those are things that we can look at in hindsight and say those are probably the steps that got him to where he ended up on Bourbon Street. But somebody who is looking for purpose and structure in life probably also describes 75% of the young Americans who join the military or join the Peace Corps for that matter.
Yeah. All right. Interesting points. David Viola, thank you for your time.
Thank you.